Hi, boys and girls. Miss Schliff here. Today I'm going to have a little read aloud for you and some text-to-text connections. But before we begin, let me give you our learning target. So today's learning target is I can make text-to-text connections by comparing two stories. Repeat after me. I can make text-to-text connections by comparing two stories. Great. So today the two stories that we are going to compare are The Three Little Pigs, the original story, and the true story of The Three Little Pigs by the wolf. So I'm going to only read you the true story of The Three Little Pigs because I think most of us are familiar with the original story. We will review it though real quick. We know that The Three Little Pigs is about three pigs who build different houses out of different materials, and the wolf comes along and blows the houses down so he can eat the pigs. We know that the first two pigs, the sticks and the straw houses, they fall down. Now, however, the third house does not fall down because it is made out of brick, and then the pig ends up eating the wolf in the end. So it kind of threw us for a loop. But that is just the gist of the original Three Little Pigs story. And while I'm reading, I want you to keep in mind, we have been working on text-to-self connections, but now we are transitioning to text-to-text connections. So this is kind of an easier way to think about it because these stories are so similar. But as you get better at this, I want you to be able to read a story and compare it to maybe other stories that you've read in the past. So, something to think about for text-to-text connections is that good readers think about how one book reminds them of other books. They can tell how texts are alike and different. So when we do that, sometimes we use things, different tools, like a Venn diagram, for example, tells us how one story is different than another, but in the middle, it will tell us how they are alike. So we'll work on that today after I read the story to you. So just keep in mind that we always think about how one book can connect to another one. That's how we make text-to-text connections. Okay, without further ado, here is the true story of The Three Little Pigs. And the author says here, by a wolf, as told by John Scieszka and illustrated by Lane Smith. Everybody knows the story of The Three Little Pigs, or at least they think they do. But I'll let you in on a little secret. Nobody knows the real story because nobody has ever heard my side of the story. I'm the wolf, Alexander T. Wolf. You can call me Al. I don't know how this whole big bad wolf thing got started, but it's all wrong. Maybe it's because of our diet. Hey, it's not my fault wolves eat cute little animals like bunnies and sheep and pigs. That's just the way we are. If cheeseburgers were cute, folks would probably think you were big and bad too. But like I was saying, the whole big bad wolf thing is all wrong. The real story is about a sneeze and a cup of sugar. This is the real story. Way back in Once Upon a Time, I was making a birthday cake for my dear old granny. I had a terrible sneezing cold. I ran out of sugar. So I walked down the street to ask my neighbor for a cup of sugar. Now this neighbor was a pig, and he wasn't too bright either. He had built his whole house out of straw. Can you believe it? I mean, who in his right mind would build a house of straw? So, of course, the minute I knocked on the door, it felt right in. I didn't want to just walk into someone else's house, so I called, "Little pig, are you in?" No answer. I was just about to go home without the cup of sugar for my dear old granny's birthday cake. That's when my nose started to itch. I felt a sneeze coming on. Well, I huffed and I snuffed. And I sneezed a great sneeze. Uh-oh. That doesn't look good. And you know what? That whole darn straw house fell down, and right in the middle of the pile of straw was the first little pig, dead as a doornail. Ooh, that uses the word as, dead as a doornail. Isn't that kind of like what we learned, a key word that we make similes with? Comparing two things with like or as, right? He had been home the whole time. It seemed like a shame to leave a perfectly good ham dinner lying there in the straw, so I ate it up. Think of it as a big cheeseburger just lying there. I was feeling a little better, but I still didn't have my cup of sugar, so I went to the next neighbor's house. This neighbor was the first little pig's brother. He was a little smarter, but not much. He had built his house of sticks. I rang the bell on the stick house. Nobody answered. I called, Mr. Pig, are you in?" He yelled back, "Go away, Wolf. You can't come in. I'm shaving the hairs on my chinny chin chin." I had just grabbed the doorknob when I felt another sneeze coming on. I huffed and I snuffed and I tried to cover my mouth, but I sneezed a great sneeze. And you're not going to believe it, but this guy's house fell down just like his brother's. When the dust cleared, there was the second little pig, dead as a doornail. Wolf's honor. Now, you know, food will spoil if you just leave it out in the open, so I did the only thing there was to do. I had dinner again. Think of it as a second helping. I was getting awfully full, but my cold was feeling a little better, and I still didn't have that cup of sugar for my dear old granny's birthday cake, so I went to the next house. This guy was the first and second little pig's brother. He must have been the brains of the family. He had built his house of bricks. I knocked on the brick house. No answer. I called, Mr. Pig, are you in?" And do you know what that rude little porker answered? "Get out of here, Wolf. Don't bother me again." Talk about impolite. He probably had a whole sack full of sugar, and he wouldn't give me even one little cup for my dear sweet old granny's birthday cake. What a pig! I was just about to go home and maybe make a nice birthday card instead of a cake when I felt my cold coming on. I huffed and I snuffed and I sneezed once again. Then the third little pig yelled, "And your old granny can sit on a pin." Now, I'm usually a pretty calm fellow, but when somebody talks about my granny like that, I go a little crazy. When the cops drove up, of course, I was trying to break down this pig's door, and the whole time I was huffing and puffing and sneezing and making a real scene. The rest, as they say, is history. The news reporters found out about the two pigs I had for dinner. They figured a sick guy going to borrow a cup of sugar didn't sound very exciting, so they jazzed up the story with all of that huff and puff and blow your house down, and they made me the big bad wolf. That's it, the real story. I was framed. But maybe you could loan me a cup of sugar. Oh dear. All right, so now that we are familiar with both of the stories, the original story of the Three Little Pigs and the true story of the Three Little Pigs, let's make some connections. Okay, so I have some cards here, and we're going to talk about some similarities and differences with our Venn diagram. So in one of the stories, the third pig ate the wolf. So in your mind, I want you to think, the third pig ate the wolf. Did that happen in the original story of the Three Little Pigs or the true story of the Three Little Pigs that I just read? Now, if you're thinking it was the original story, you are correct. And it didn't happen in both of the stories. So we are going to put it in this column on our Venn diagram because it is different and it is unique to only the Three Little Pigs story, the original one. So it goes right over here under that title. Now, at the end of one of the stories, the wolf went to jail. So we already know that the end of the original story, the third pig ate the wolf. So this didn't happen in both of the stories, did it? No, so it's not a similarity. This is unique to the true story of the Three Little Pigs that the wolf told. The wolf went to jail in the end. So we are going to put this under the title of the true story of the Three Little Pigs. Okay, so now this one says, 3 little pigs and a big bad wolf. Now, does one of the stories have these characters in it, or do both of the stories have these characters in it? They both do. So that is a similarity, and that's how we can connect these two texts. They have the same characters. They have the 3 little pigs and the big bad wolf. Even though the stories are different, the characters are the same. So this is our connection in the middle here. Our similarity is our text-to-text connection. That is how the stories are alike. Great. So my next card says that the wolf wanted to bake a cake for his granny, but he needed sugar. Is this unique to one of the stories, or is it alike between both of them? You're right, it is unique to one of the stories. Now, in your mind, I want you to think, which story did the wolf need sugar? If you said the true story of the 3 little pigs, the one that I just read to you, you are correct. In that story, the wolf wanted to bake a cake for his granny, but he needed sugar. So this is how the true story of the 3 little pigs is different from the original 3 little pigs story. So I'm going to put it under the title for the true story. Great. So this card says, Wolf came after the pigs because he was hungry. Is this alike or different? If you said that it is one of the differences in the stories, you are correct. So we know that this happened in the original story of the 3 little pigs. The wolf came after the pigs because he was hungry. So I'm going to put it under the title of the original story of the 3 little pigs. And that is another way that they're different. Now, the first 2 pigs were eaten by the wolf. Is this is this a way that the stories were similar or different? Did this occur in both or just one of the stories? If you said that it occurred in both of the stories, you are correct. This is how the stories are alike. The first 2 pigs were eaten in both of the stories by the wolf. So this is another text-to-text connection. This is how they are similar. And as we go along and talk about these are really kind of surface level connections that are very obvious to try to get you used to connecting the 2 texts. It is more common to make surface level connections between texts just because when you're reading along and you're thinking real quick, you're like, oh, hey, that happened in this story that I read. It is a lot harder to make deeper connections when you're doing text-to-text connections, but it is possible, and it's something that we will talk about in the future. So my last card here said, the pig who built the brick house was the smartest. And obviously this is an opinion, but we can all kind of agree with it because that pig was the pig that survived, right? So did this happen in just one of the stories or both of them? If you said that it happened in both of them, you are correct. This is another way that the stories are alike. The third pig survived, and there's kind of a hidden meaning behind this part in the story. So the pig that built his house out of brick, we know that it took him a lot of time, and it took him a lot of patience, and it was a lot of work. So it just shows that it's kind of trying to teach us that hard work and dedication pay off in the end. So that's kind of the hidden moral between for the original story of the Three Little Pigs, is that hard work and dedication pay off, because the stick house and the straw house, those pigs had more time to play and they just wanted to get their houses done and built so they could go have fun, when the pig who was building the brick house spent more time and didn't get to play and have fun, but in the end he survived. So I really like that hidden message there. But in the end, both stories, that third pig, he survived. So he was the smartest because he built the better house. So let me go over again. When we're making text-to-text connections, good readers think about how the book reminds them of other books, so they can tell how the texts are alike and different. So I just read, I read The True Story of the Three Little Pigs, and we compared it to the original story of the Three Little Pigs, which most people are already pretty familiar with. And we compared the two with using a Venn diagram, and we talked about the similarities, which are the text-to-text connections. So you should be familiar now with making text-to-text connections. So when you're reading on your own, I would love, love, love for you to be thinking about how your book, your current book or story, can be connected to maybe stories or books you've read in the past. So to go over our learning target one more time, your learning target was, I can make text-to-text connections by comparing two stories. So if you were able to do this along with me, then you are good to go. And I can't wait to see and hear more text-to-text connections that you make in the future. Bye!